Backed with a roaring economy which in the last decade grew by double-digit figures, China continues to flex its muscles in Africa. In 2009, China, the second largest economy in the world, surpassed the US as Africa's largest trading partner. Uganda has since benefited immensely from this courtship through grants, interest-free loans, concessional loans, and infrastructure development. Take, for example, the Chinese government funded the construction of the Office of the President at a cost of $27 million, the Ministry of Finance at $25 million, the Nelson Mandela National Stadium at a cost of $36 million, the China-Uganda Friendship Hospital in Nagulu at a cost of $6 million, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Most of these projects are funded by grants, which do not compel Uganda to pay back the funds. China further cancelled all debts Uganda owed before 2005, amounting to $30 million.
Now we are in a better economic position. We can do a lot to help our Ugandan and African brothers and sisters to live a good life. That is very simple.
As opposed to some aid that comes with stringent conditions, China's policy not to rattle the feathers of African strongmen has won its admiration.
We have a trust because we know you have enough wisdom to solve all these kind of problems. You don't need other people to tell you how to do.
So, why does China continue to reward Africa with such generosity? Is it seeking to fish in the troubled waters just like the West in what some scholars have referred to as a subtle recolonization scheme?
The Chinese are not just making a verbal statement, they are making a serious economic statement. They have more reserves than the US has. In fact, the US is quoting China for those monies. Europe, especially Britain, is quoting China for those monies to invest in the economy. So we in Africa, if we don't deal with China, we shall be losing out because China has more money than any of these countries around.
Already, there is a reward. Chinese firms have been awarded huge construction contracts, like the construction of the Kampala-Entebbe Expressway at $350 million. The China National Offshore Oil Corporation was granted the first production license, and the construction of the $1.5 billion Karuma Dam.
Two other Chinese companies, Jezuba and CWE, will similarly take on Ayago, which is downstream here, and Isimba, according to the understanding you reached with the Chinese side.
All these projects will be funded by concessional loans from Chinese banks. But why do Chinese firms have an upper hand in the bid?
There are areas where the Chinese capital, Chinese companies or Chinese banks have already committed capital. They give you money in advance, and if it is their money, they like to take the contract. That's what has been happening in some of these contracts, like Karuma. The Chinese government guaranteed Chinese banks to give Uganda over $1 billion. So that can influence whether the Chinese companies take the contract or not, and that's, I think, what has happened in some of the contracts.
China also offers better terms for its loans compared to the international institutes like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
As much as we say they don't have conditionalities around human rights, they have their own conditionalities. And these conditionalities are tied to, say, 50% of the products must come from China. A number of laborers must come from China. And it's not surprising that we have over 3,000 Chinese in Uganda. So you find that they have that tiredness of their projects.
In turn, many Chinese nationals continue to flock Uganda. The Uganda Investments Authority records show that more than 360 registered business companies with a capital investment of $1.1 billion belong to Chinese nationals. Trade between the two partner states is loop-sided, as China's exports to Uganda are worth $524 million, while Uganda exports goods worth $72 million to China.
You go home and you look around your house and you ask yourself what is Chinese and what isn't. What would you find as the biggest share? And for me, that's the biggest concern, because every time I enter a restaurant, I find that the toothpicks I'm using are Chinese. We have a lot of timber here. We have a project of toothpicks that has stalled with the Industrial Research Institute.
China has, however, silenced its critics by granting zero tariffs on 95% of the Ugandan products that enter the Chinese market. Despite this, a lot of fake goods, especially from China, have continued to enter the market.
The Chinese are exporting more than we do. They are making investments in Uganda. We are not making the investments. So, and all those have economic implications, because for us to remain a net importer, that means we leave our exchange rate vulnerable because we keep demanding the foreign exchange for our trade.
China continues to make inroads in the resource-rich Africa, all the way from the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa to the Rabat in North Africa. Sserwanjja, NTV.